I call my campaign more like the Temple of Elemental Evil meets the Game of Thrones. So it has a lot of Game of Thrones noble type politics. Some are up to no good. Some are helping the temple. Some are just oblivious, or they just get in the way, or they're greedy. But the thing they have in common, the key factor here, is they're privy to a lot of information that normal people don't have, and also they're a great resource. They're a great resource not only for equipment and training, but also for getting quests, for missions, for helping them out. Hello, this is David of the Three Arcs channel. This video would be the capstone of all my other videos in this campaign of the Temple of Elemental Evil in the Viscounty of Verbabank.
Greyhawk says this Temple Elemental Evil campaign. Gug says this Orc campaign. We are strong. Spineless humans weak.
Filth, maggot, dunghill.
Paleskins do not fight.
Grisnak, you got this into this. When I tell them at Blackthorn,
I created a video for every village in the area that I expected my players to interact with, to travel there. Much like the village of Hommlet, how every NPC and faction is fully detailed out at all the locations, I did the same thing with a dozen villages in the Viscounty of Verbabank. In that way, I could take the Temple of Elemental Evil module and create more of a sandbox feel to the campaign. Much like how the B2 module Keep on the Borderlands is, they give you a keep, and they give you a dungeon, and they give you some keyed areas outside. I just expanded that 1,000 times over the Viscounty of Verbabank, the Gnarly Forest, the Cron Hills, Selene, Firandi, Valuna, the Knife Dive, and Divers. I feel if you're going to run an epic campaign from the very beginning until past the actual module itself, into its completion, I think you should really prepare more than just the village of Hommlet, which has already have been prepared in the T1 module, and Nope, which is only partially prepared in the original Temple of Elemental Evil module. And Goodman Games released a new 5th edition version where they actually keyed in several more locations in the village. Not as much as the village of Hommlet or the other villages I keyed in around the Viscounty of Verbabank. But it does go a long way, and that's some really good writing, and it's definitely a great source to pull inspiration and material from to run the campaign. But what they offer is just an inkling, just a small percentage more of what it takes to really prepare an epic campaign for the Temple of Elemental Evil. It takes more than creating a half a dozen more locations in Nope. That there are other cult locations, outposts within the area. How far, it's up to the DM, but I extend it from the Wild Coast to Valuna to Firandi, all the way down to Selene. So not only is the Moat House out there, but there's several or more other outposts doing pretty much the same thing. Wachi put out a module, The Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil. In that module, they actually created 4 more outposts for every faction in the Temple of Elemental Evil: fire, air, water, and earth. Those 4 outposts are really well keyed in that module. Every location has rooms and locations with monsters and stats and treasure and descriptions and flavor text. But also the leaders of these outposts have a background and personality. And they're up to no good too, as you would expect, as agents of the Temple of Elemental Evil would behave. But that module is designed for 5th edition in Forgotten Realms. And also, it's a return to the actual adventure. So it's years later, I believe maybe 20 years later in the timeline, where another party has already brought down the Moat House, infiltrated Nulb, found out all its secrets, and got to the Temple of Mental Evil and conquered them, and did whatever happened at the end of that module. So this module that I'm referring to that has a great resource for material and artwork, you'd have to convert a lot of that stuff to a previous timeline. So you can use the information from that to fill your world with more locations and things for the players to do. So this video is to take this module, the Temple of Elemental Evil, and talk about expanding it into an epic campaign. A campaign that starts with rich character backgrounds at first level. They come from somewhere, and they work their way up, tracking down these rumors, being recruited by nobles and interacting with them and going on quests for them, keeping them busy throughout the Viscounty and the surrounding area as they level up. Because when you run the T1 module, it's a first level module. You go to the village and you role play, probably for a night, and then you finally find out where the moat house is, and maybe a couple other encounters out in the wilds to help them get some experience points. But when they finally get to the moat house, after maybe a wandering monster, and then they clear out the top level, maybe some of those players will reach second level. And then when they go down to the lower level, they're going to get some more experience. But by the time they get to Lareth and his men, every party I've seen get that far has been overwhelmed. It's just too hard of an encounter to actually win the day, or maybe even get away without a party wipe. Which is probably a good thing because, as the DM for the campaign, it's a good idea to let Lareth get away, so that way he can be a thorn in the player's side later. But you hear a lot of advice on the forums to add more encounters or things for the players to do before they get to that point. So you can ensure that at least everybody's level 2. Maybe the rogue in the party might be level 3, and they could have a good chance against him and give you more role-playing opportunity with Lareth, because there's not much role-playing except for him shouting at them as they're running away, which happened in every group I ever ran. So, as a dungeon master, you got to think about, where you want your players to start. And you got to be aware of that it need to get those players to second level by the time you get to the bottom of the moat house, to Lareth. So with that in mind, on Goodman Games release of 5th edition, and a few others I found on the internet, they added a bandit encounter on the way to the Hommlet. And that's always been really good advice for to start off a new campaign with combat, because it brings the new players together, it breaks the ice, they get more comfortable, and they get to relate more with each other's characters and get a feel for them. And so having a good combat that's not lethal actually helps bring the party together. And so both those several different modules actually added a bandit encounter that's tied in with the camp across the road from the Tower of Burn and Rufus. But I remember in the 80s, I would hit them with something from the Wandering Monsters random table that's in the module. It could have been bandage, it could have been anything, depending on what I rolled. And then when you get into the village, players will probably go to the Inn of the Welcome Winds and spend the night, get rumors, maybe get some henchmen. Then the next day, they'll track down those rumors and visit the different locations like the Traders or the Brewmeister or St. Cuthbert or the Tower of Burn and Rufus or even the Druid. So they're spending time role-playing, getting more information, and then they continue on to the moat house. In my campaign, I kind of want to bring the entire world together for the players, because the Greyhawk box set's really big. It's a lot of material, a lot of history, and you can't expect the players to read all that and then role-play that information. It's hard enough for just a dungeon master to be able to do that, even with digital tools, because I run my game with a laptop and I get a lot of my information at my fingertips, rather than having a massive 5,000-page notebook. Okay, typically, when somebody runs this module, this campaign, they'll vaguely say their party came from Verbank up north. Or they'll vaguely say the party came from the Wild Coast, from the east, which would take them through the Gnarly Forest. I talked about that in another video, too, because it takes them right through Nulb. And I don't like the idea of the players getting eyes on Nulb too early in the campaign, especially when we need to keep them busy before they get to 5th level. The players have no business at all being in Nulb under 5th level. So we need to keep them busy and get them leveling up, but not just random stuff like Wandering Monsters. That's why I think the other module is a great resource for creating 4 more outposts out there that are directly causing events in the area, which a lot of the nobles are aware of. The nobles in my campaign don't necessarily know what's going on at all. Some of them might. Maybe one knows quite a bit more. But vaguely, these outposts are under orders, just like at the moat house, to keep a low profile. So they're raiding, they're banditry, they're scouting, they're infiltrating the city with their contacts there. And it gives them opportunity to recruit and bring in more supplies for the Temple of Elemental Evil without being directed there directly. A base of operation for like one of the cults of the Earth Elemental cult would have a base in an old monastery that was abandoned, and they've taken over and they're pretending to be monks. And I think that's a fantastic, really brilliant idea for one of the cults out there. The heir Then you have the air cultists. They have a base in a tower, and they're under the guise of a club of nobles that like to ride griffins or vultures, or with a legitimate lord running the place. So they're under no suspicion at this time either. As part of my wandering monster encounter table throughout the area, it could be one of these raiding parties from one of these cults. So then you have another one that's on top of an abandoned tower on a mountain, a hilltop. There's a self-professed druid there who is really one of the cultists. And he put out word that he discovered a new ritual called the Wicker Man. The ritual is supposed to bring balance back to nature. And so all the druids in the area are very interested in what's going on there. Then they're not all going there, but they have maybe some representatives that went. Some of the more wiser, higher level ones, like Giroux in the village of Hommlet, he would not go, but he would be curious of what's going on, and he does have some rumors about it. And then the water elemental has a fort at the mouth of the river going into Nob. It's an old abandoned guard fort for the river, and they've taken over under the guise of protecting the river, protecting the merchant ways to Nob from piracy, even though they are the ones that are the pirates. And they have a pirate captain with 2 ships, and he's got a couple lieutenants under him, and they have this whole fort that the players can clean out. So there's a lot to do in this campaign besides just going to the moat house, finding Nob, and finding the entrance into the Temple Elemental Evil dungeon, which is, if you're running a lethal type game system like Old School Essentials or Castles and Crusades, they're going to need some levels before they go in there. Because it's expected for the players to end up being anywhere from 10th to 12th level before this is all said and done. That's a lot of experience points, depending on how you handed it out. So I expanded on the idea in this video and a couple others before this that you need to broaden the scope of the module. You have to create more outposts out there, more organizations, who they're working with, from the slavers to the Wild Coast to certain noblemen and rich merchantmen in the city of Verbavank. So let's examine that real quick. Yes, it says in the module that Gary Gygax wrote that he expected the Dungeon Master to develop more of the world around the Temple of Elemental Evil. It does not exist in a vacuum. They need supplies, they need slaves, they need to recruit monsters and more powerful men. And per the module, you're getting a dozen or 2 dozen per week of recruitment coming in. Plus you're going to need all the supplies and all the loot that the bandits have been delivering to the temple. All that has to get to the temple to be able to fund this endeavor, to be able to feed their servants and men, to pay them. Okay, so what's that mean in the original module? I guess most DMs over the years, when they ran this, they ran it from the pages, which is a huge mistake. Even Gary said in the pages that you should develop more of the area and write this out. He said if he was able to do that himself from his campaign, the module would end up over 1,000 pages, which they could not publish. So they expected you to do all this. So you got to think logically. If a person was to run this right from the pages, they would just make great use of the wandering monster tables for the area. And that is a good, legitimate way, if you're not prepared, to be able to add that to the game by using random charts. I get that. But I'd like to be able to add more of those organizations outside, besides a line item on a random wandering chart. So obviously there should be other outposts, which is what WotC did with that module that they released. They added 4 more outposts out there, 1 for each of the temples. Great idea. So now that you have them out there, you're going to be able to localize some of those wandering monster chart tables. They got raiding parties out there that are very active, and the players could come across them, either along one of the roads, or maybe they're attacking one of the local farms, a passing caravan along the merchant road, or maybe they're raiding a local ranch or a farm. And so that way you know where they're coming from. So when the encounter is over, the players could either find some visual clues on them, where they came from or who they belong to, their organization. They'll see the symbol of the cult on them and the kind of weapons and what they look like. Some are specialty type fighters and priests and wizards. They have a distinctive look to them, a certain color of robes and armor that they wear. They're very distinctive, and I like what they did in that module, and I used most of that. Nothing too ridiculous, but I used most of it. And also, they can question them. So if they capture if they have any captives, they can interrogate them and learn a lot more. So you got to know what It's a lot easier to run this game if you already know what the non-player characters know, what information to share with the players, rather than just wing it and pull it right out of the air. I know a lot of DMs do that, but I believe a much more prepared DM with material at his fingertips is a better DM when it comes to that sort of thing. When it comes to providing another level of immersion to the campaign. I'm not talking about role-playing or character voices, but I'm just talking about the information the players gather as they investigate the world around them, the things that they learn from non-player characters, from monsters, from locations. And if you have that wealth of extra line items or a bullet point that you can give them, so much the better, rather than just kind of making it up. And I know there's some really good DMs that can do that, but for me to run an epic campaign, I have to have a lot of notes and prepared material. So now you have these 4 or 5 outposts that you can use in the campaign to send the players chasing after. Now you have to figure out where they're going to come from. So I like to have them start from the city of Verbabank. Okay, looking at the map here I had to pull up. You see that in the top left-hand corner is the city of Verbabank. I'll zoom in. That's as far as I can go. This is the wonderful Anna Meyer's maps. And I see that and she does a great job of detailing the world out. That was developed by the Living Greyhawk times of 2000 to 2008, where they forwarded the timeline of Greyhawk to the year 594 Common Year, where their original campaign from the Temple of Elemental Evil started in the year 576 Common Year. And we zoom down to the south there to Hommlet. And you can see from the map that the 4 roads that go into Hommlet. The one from the north will lead you through a lot of villages up the Knives Run to the city of Verbabank and Ferrandi, and even Valuna. And then the next trail that runs to the south goes to Sheer Knob down to Ostfirk, which is on the border of Selene. You could have a party come from that direction as well. If you had an adventuring party full of elves and half-elves, there's nothing saying that you can't have them come from not only the Gnarly Forest or Verbabank, but you can have them come from the magical Fey Kingdom of Selene to the south. And so they could be coming up from Ostfirk to the village of Hommlet to find out, to follow up on some rumors that they might have heard of, or whatever campaign start that you came up with. But the same thing can be said about coming from the east through or from the Gnarly Forest. This map isn't actually entirely correct on the way they have these roads. I've seen many other maps where they place the moat house a little bit differently, because this lower road is actually the high road. It's the least traveled and most dangerous road that leads to Nulb, and it's also the shortest. If you want to take the longer road, which is just a little bit to the north, that's called the low road, and that leads to Nulb too. And most merchants make their way safely to Nulb along that way, even though it's being preyed upon by bandits. So the party can definitely come from the east as well. The campaign start, the module start, if you read the introduction and watch my video in the introduction to the T1 module, Village of Hommlet, it has the party coming from the north, from anywhere, maybe from the Gnarly Forest from the north, or from Valuna, Thurandi, or Verbabank too. In any case, most groups or campaigns I've ever seen or ever heard don't have much of a background when they first start playing. They just have them vaguely meet together on the road, usually escorting a caravan, and that's when they get hit by bandits on the way into the village of Hommlet. Obviously, those players came from somewhere. They obviously have a background. You would not expect that some of them might not be from city of Verbabank. One of them could be from one of these smaller villages. Another, maybe a ranger, half-elven, came from the Gnarly Forest, and now he's in Verbabank for another reason, and that's how he got caught up with these players. Maybe a paladin's from Valuna to the west, or Ferrandi to the north, because he's trying to find his prince. Whatever real background you can develop for this campaign based on the facts of the campaign adds another layer of depth and pleasure to the game if you can do that. Like the prince, if they ever rescue him on the 3rd level or so, to be a great day for them, because they'll be heroes of Ferrandi and all that goes with that. And that will be one of those long-coming type rewards that they'll be pretty excited about. And that's what I'm talking about when you're adding another layer of depth to the campaign. And the more layers you can add, it's like an onion. You peel back one layer, and then you find another layer that you have to examine and figure out, and then the next layer and next layer, until you finally get to the Temple of Elemental Evil. And that's how I treat this campaign. I've created enough backgrounds, I wrote enough backgrounds for this campaign where I can kind of ask a player kind of what he wants to be or what he wants to do, and then I'll go ahead and write him a background that's like maybe 3 paragraphs long based on what he required. Like he's from a farm, or he's from a merchant ship, or maybe he was a caravan guard or something, or a son's baker in Verbabunk. I actually added locations in Verbabunk and villages just to accommodate just to have a player come from there. He gave me an idea of who his parents were, and I just kind of created them as non-player characters, unless they're dead. But still, he still has a place that he's from, where he grew up, or maybe where somebody raised him, or some organization that trained him and released him into the world to become a hero. So I like to put all that together for the players at the beginning of the campaign. I'm talking. So let's get something straight here, though. I'm talking about an epic campaign. I'm talking about one that you put a lot of time and effort into, and you expect it and hope it gets all the way to the very end, until maybe their 10th to 12th level, and maybe even more after that, do more modules. But this is a long campaign. Every DM I've ever talked to always said it takes them at least a year to run it by the book, without any notes, just running it from the pages, which I strongly disagree with, which I strongly do not recommend. My stance is the more you prepare, the better the campaign's going to be, and then it's going to get to a point where it's an epic campaign if you can pull it off well, and if you have the right players. Whenever I meet new players and they want to join one of my groups, a campaign I'm running, those are more fun type campaigns, short campaigns. For example, the B2 module that I keep running, that's one of my groups. I consider that a mini campaign. It gets you up to the 3rd level. It takes maybe 20, 25 sessions to beat the whole thing at 6 hours a session. There's a lot of role playing. And then they finally finish that. And if you want to, you can extend it, go further. You can continue the campaign if you want to, just go farther. I could even link this to my Temple of Elemental Evil campaign if I wanted to. But that means the players will be starting that campaign off around 2nd or 3rd, probably 3rd level. But I can do that if I want to. But I'm talking about running the Temple of Elemental Evil from scratch, from the very beginning, without running nothing else first. So you get these short, fun dungeons. I've got great modules that are fun to play, and they take maybe 10 sessions to beat. And they're a lot of fun, and you can just run them over one after another, just having fun. And a lot of these type of adventures and modules. And that's kind of a campaign, but it's not what I consider an epic campaign. An epic campaign is carefully curtailed, grand arc of a campaign, like as large as the Dragonlance series, which is a linear campaign. It's like playing a storybook. I'm not talking about going that far, but a sandbox, a large one. Whenever you talk about like video game MMOs, those multi-user games like World of Warcraft or EverQuest, it's always exciting whenever a new one comes out that they made a bigger world, and then the bigger world, and we got 12 cities, we have 20 cities, we have 4 planets, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it just gives the players a more area to interact with. I consider that a sandbox. There's a limit to the sandbox. There's edges, but the larger the sandbox, the more freedom the players have. And if you're a good enough DM to prepare a small area like the B2 module with the keep and the caves, that's a good practice. That's a great place to start. A dungeon master that can handle that size of a campaign area, and then you get more experience and you can handle a larger one. I seen modules where they had 8 to 9 villages in it that were all keyed, and that was just one module. And so as you run these, you get better and better at it. And so my sandbox for this actual campaign, since I've been running it for 40 years, is anywhere from the Wild Coast all the way up to Thirandi, halfway up Thirandi, and to Valuna, to the Diocese, through the Lort Mill Mountains, Cron Hills, and then Selene, and down to Welkwood. I've been working on this campaign for years. Every one of those cities and villages are fully keyed with all the non-player characters and their individual backgrounds and looks and traits. It was a lot of work, but I do cheat a little bit. I have access to the Living Greyhawk series for the Viscounty at Verbabunk, and I pull a lot of information. So not only do I pull information from the module I was talking about before, which is the reissue, the Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil by Wachi, there's a lot of non-player characters in there with rich backgrounds and detailed stats and equipped. And so you can pull those into the campaign. They're so valuable. And then there's maps, locations, names. They've created locations that didn't exist before. And I love it. If I think it's logical and it makes sense, because the world of Greyhawk is kind of a blank slate. There's only shows the capitals and the major roads and the major rivers. There's a lot more rivers and roads in the campaign world, and a lot of villages, countless. In fact, if you look at the medieval times, there's usually a village every 10 miles, because 10 miles is usually the most merchant caravan can go in one day, and they do not want to stop in the middle of nowhere and spend the night. So that's why towns were built up there. If they were going on longer distance, and let's say it's 50 miles away, they're going to have to camp along the way. Over the years, decades, centuries, as they do that, towns build up in those spots. It's just human nature. Whenever somebody continually stops to camp for the night, eventually it's going to grow into a hamlet, then a town, then a village and city, depending on the territory. So let me show you another map that I made, because this one is good. If you zoom out, it shows quite a bit. The area, there's the Fairy Kingdom there, and there's Greyhawk to the right. Greyhawk City is on this map. So actually, this map that you're looking at right here, this is what I pretty much fully keyed for the entire campaign. Every single one of these locations. I might be missing, let's see, what am I missing if I go up here? Littleburg. I don't know anything about Littleburg. It would be logical a player might be from there. So if that was the case and I wanted to do it, I could probably put something together for that character's background. That's asking a lot. It just depends. Sometimes I do it if it's quick, because I've done this so much. Copy paste, change some words, and good to go. Like these way out here, I haven't done. It's on the edges, but everything else in the middle has been done. And I think there's a lot more village type areas within the Fairy Kingdom and Welkwood, but it's just not on this map. No DM or Living Greyhawk has ever created a location in this area. That's why there's nothing there now. Doesn't mean there isn't anything there. It just a DM has not created it yet, and that's how Greyhawk grew. It's what is expected. You read the box set. The box set has the basic Darlene map, and it has just the basics of the capitals, the major geographical areas, the cities, and the roads, and the rivers, and the lakes. But over the years, Greyhawk has grown. Where a lot of these locations, traditionally where these locations came from, the smaller ones, are from modules. And that's what I always liked about Greyhawk. Greyhawk grew with modules, where Forgotten Realms just gave you this sweeping description of what that area is like, and maybe what that capital city is like, and those hills. And it was more of like a reading a novel type description of these areas, but they weren't detailed. They weren't real places like you would see in Greyhawk with a module. The village of Hommlet really wasn't there. It didn't really exist until they made the module, and then it put it there. And Nulb, same thing. There's a lot of the Saltwater series. They filled in and detailed that area. I'm not just talking about the village either. The streams and the local woods and some maybe other locations like an abandoned tower or something. So modules actually detailed the world in back in the Greyhawk days, where in Forgotten Realms they didn't do that for a very long time. I mean, I was running and playing in Forgotten Realms when it first came out. And I did it for a few years, and I was just frustrated. There wasn't a lot of material, except for journal volumes for that area. And it was like reading a storybook. A DM would have to roleplay that. And there was no keyed locations or NPCs fully developed. Maybe a couple in the book, like the Harpers or something. But no, not the local mayor or the local constable or anything like that. So then I created my own map. Because in my campaign, when you're running a campaign, like the B2 module, Keep on the Borderlands, you got the map and you got the keep, at the edge of the map, and you see a road in the forest and the swamp, and the road goes up past the Caves of Chaos, and the caves are there on the map. And so what that module did is it added those landmark features, those roads and those rivers and the marsh, to the world of Greyhawk. For example, that's what the module would have done. And, of course, you can put the B2 anywhere you want, but that's besides the point. The point I'm making is modules filled in a local area. So when I'm running it, when you're running the B2 module, for example, you need that. You need that information to be able to run it, to help you run it, to make it more complex and more interesting with more layers, another level of immersion, I suppose. But the T1 module Village of Hommlet gave you a small area. It's like this map right here. That's those 2 hexes, and that's it. And I wanted more. I wanted more of the area because of the politics involved here, with the Temple of Elemental Evil and the nobility and rich merchantmen and Verbabank and divers. I needed more information. But I wanted more detailed mapping of a wider area, so I decided to create it myself. So I took the existing map of Anna Myers, the locations of the road, the streams, and the villages. And I kind of detailed it so I can zoom in more. See, I can zoom in really far now. And you can see the swamps and the gnarly forest, which is really cool. It was Twilight Falls. And I needed this kind of level of detail for my campaign, much like a smaller map of like the B2 or the T1 module that there's 2 hexes. And so I wanted something that was a larger area to make a more detailed sandbox. Then I thought, okay, where are my players going to be from? Well, obviously, all these different characters are going to be from all sorts of places. You got half-elven druids, you got human rangers, you got paladins from this faith or that faith, clerics, wizards. There's 2 wizard schools here in Verbabank, but it could be from divers or Greyhawk. These fighters could have been on the merchant roads or part of an army. They don't have to be from Verbabank. They can be from Cinerandi. Maybe one's a fisherman. He's more like a pirate seaman type kind of guy that grew up on his father's merchant fishing ship. Really good at tying knots and swimming. That's how I do my background skills, based on your background. So where's that from? So let's say you got a background character that grew up on the river fishing with his father. I'd pick one of the villages along the Volverdiver River. This map doesn't go past that part, but right there at the very top, there is a village right there. So he very well could be from there. Or it could be from the capital of Verbabank itself. It could be from anywhere. So anyway, obviously, all these characters are from other locations, and they came together, and they came to Verbabank for a reason. So that's the key right there. So what's the reason why all these different kind of players, these different character types, all came to Verbabank to form an adventuring group and maybe pursue looking for bandits in the village of Hommlet area to the south? That's kind of a stretch. So you have to make stuff up yourself. You have to create some good hooks there. And I've created quite a few hooks. And in my future video, I'll go over all those hooks that I used in more detail. I guess it's going to be a lot longer video for that. And also, in this campaign over arc, I'm going to describe what the different locations these players are from and where they're meeting and why inside the city itself. And then another video after that will be focused on their first adventure, their first mission with Lady Osberry. She's going to send them on a mission to recover her family jewels, the Jewel of Osberry and the Sword of Osberry. And it's off to the east into the gnarly forest somewhere. There's a dungeon. So I send the players to their first dungeon at first level. It's going to be a lot of role-playing, meeting in the Verbabank, the city, getting the quest, and buying whatever equipment they need and figure out how they're going to travel over land. And they're going to get to Penwick, and then they're going to probably spend the night there and hang out and go to the inn and get rumors and maybe recruit henchmen, all the normal things that you do in D&D. And then they go to sleep for the night and wake up for another morning journey. So that's 10 miles right there. Every hex on my map is 1 mile. That makes it a lot easier. And then there's another 10 miles or a full day's journey to the swamps. You can go to Anshan or to the north, Fulhurst Moors. So from there, you're going to go to the dungeon. But you don't know exactly where the dungeon is yet because nobody really knows. And so all these clues I'm just giving them as they journey for 2 days to the fens. And then from there, they're going to have to figure out where to go from there. So I'll cover that in another video. So that first module is designed with all those wandering monster encounters on the way there and back. It's designed to get all the players to second level. Maybe a thief could be third. That's only 1,200 experience points. Well, it depends what game you play. So you could have a good head start. Then after that adventure, that first dungeon, that mission is completed, and you can give them story award, mission, bonus experience points for that if you want, if they return the sword and gem, of course. So they head south, back down to the village of Hommlet, and then they continue the T1 module preferably very close to second level or at second level. And then you can hit them with the bandits and some wandering monsters in the swamp, of course. Everybody loves my frogs. And they go in and clear the top level out and the second level, and they all should be at least third level. Now you can go ahead and send them somewhere else, and I'll have more videos on what to do with that next, before they actually take on Nulb and the Temple of Elemental Evil. So I hope this overview of what I plan to do with these videos and how I managed to design and plan and plot this campaign and the story arcs has become very useful to a lot of the dungeon masters out there that follow me, that want to run this Temple of Elemental Evil campaign for their players. I share all my maps like this for free over at my Patreon. If you support me, that encourages me to make more. It does take a lot of time.
Did you enjoy video? Consider tossing support on my Patreon. It's best way to support orcs. If you would like to see more content, subscribe and post comments below. It better not be bad.